Hey everyone, Alex here, and today I wanted to make a quick guide on Google Kubernetes Engine and how you can launch a GKE cluster with Terraform and also manage it with Terraform. So what GKE is it's a managed Kubernetes service offered by Google. It makes it super simple to scale, launch, manage Kubernetes clusters, and it comes with a whole bunch of different features here, as you can see on the landing page. I will leave a link to this landing page in the description, but there is a brief overview of the many features that GKE offers, which are all fantastic. And we're going to go over how you can launch your own cluster in GCP with Terraform super fast, so you can get started playing with Kubernetes. I did create a repository called Terraform-GKE. Once again, I will leave this in the description as well. And it's very simple. There's a few Terraform files here that we're going to go through. And we're also going to launch a demo application. So go ahead and clone this locally, and then we can get started on launching a cluster. Now that you have it cloned locally, we can go over to the repository and we'll just go over a few things here. So in the first section here, I'm defining a Google Container Cluster resource within Terraform. What we have here is the definition for the master. It's going to have a few different settings here, like the name of it, the project it belongs to in GCP, the description, the location you're going to want it in. I have an option here to remove the default node pool, because what we're going to do is we're going to launch a node pool separately. We're not going to use the default one. There's an initial node count option. The master auth here, there's different ways you can enable authentication. If you leave this blank, it's going to disable it. We're not going to use basic auth for this. And we're also just going to disable this client certificate option. And below here in the Google Container Node Pool, there's also, again, a few things: the name, the project, the location you want it in, the cluster it belongs to, how many nodes. We're going to just have one for now, and the machine type, as well as some API requirements for monitoring and logging. In the variables, there's a few things defined here. We're going to want to update the project to your project, and this is currently set to mine. And then if you'd like, you can change the machine type and the initial node count, but it's not required. And then it's going to output some endpoint, the master version, and also just like what the IP address for the cluster. So you can save that value if you need it. Before we launch the cluster, I just wanted to quickly go over a value. There is a value here called preemptible, and it's set to true. If you're familiar with Amazon, this is similar to a spot instance. So if you want this cluster node to not get destroyed randomly because of price changes, you should set this to false. The reason I have this set is just for cost savings reasons, but essentially it's the equivalent of a spot instance in Amazon. So if you want to change this value, you can go ahead. And now that you're ready, we can go to the terminal and we can run our Terraform plan command. You will have to be authenticated via the Google Cloud CLI tool for this to work. And it's going to create our container cluster and then the node pool for that. So what we can do here is we can clear the screen and do Terraform apply. And we're going to say yes to this. So this is going to take a few minutes. So if you would like to grab a coffee and let this run, I'll see you guys in a little bit. So I'm back now and it's been completed. So it took about 1 minute and 40 seconds for the node pool to create, and about 6.5 minutes for the container cluster resource to finish creating. As you can see, there is a endpoint and the master version, so you can see what version we're running on. And overall, it took about 8 minutes for this to complete. So not too bad. Better than hand rolling a Kubernetes server yourself and trying to create it yourself. So it doesn't seem so bad when you think about it like that. And if we go to our browser now, we should be able to navigate to the Google Cloud Platform page. And then on the left-hand menu, there's going to be a Kubernetes Engine page. So we can click clusters. And then you can see our demo cluster here. If we want to connect to it, we can press this connect button, and it's going to give us a command line command to run. So what we can do is we can copy this. You can either run it in Cloud Shell. I'm going to run it in my terminal here and just paste that. So there you go. We have got an entry for the demo cluster. And then if you're using kubectl, you can go ahead and run kubectl get namespace. And we should see that we have our default namespace, our kubepublic, and our kubesystem namespace. So you can see that it's 7 minutes and 54 seconds old. So you can see that the cluster was launched 8 minutes ago. And now we can actually, if we want, we can add an application to our cluster. So we can go ahead and do that next. Let's go into the app directory here. Can't type. There's a few different files here. We're going to apply these and then I'll go through each of them. So you can just do, if you're using kubectl, can't spell, apply -f, and then we can do the deployment. We can do the service. And then if you do kubectl get pods, you should see that there's this demo here. And then we can do kubectl apply -f and then the ingress. The ingress is going to take a little bit just because it's going to create a Google Cloud load balancer. So just know that it takes about 5 minutes when we run that. So these are all created, and now I can actually go through what we just created here. So going back to the text editor, there were 3 different files we applied here with kubectl. So the deployment, the service, and the ingress. So first we can start with the deployment. It's going to be living in the default namespace. There's a few other things set here like the container. We're using Nginx, and we're going to pull the image if it's not there. We're going to run it on port 80 with the TCP protocol. So this is the deployment. Next, we're going to need the service. And this is just doing a few more things with the port, the target port, and then it's using type node port because we're going to need to configure the ingress to work with this properly. So service is configured here, and I'm also assuming you have a little bit of Kubernetes knowledge before you watch this video and already understand Kubernetes a little bit. So the ingress, I was talking about how it's going to launch a cloud load balancer. It's going to take about 5 minutes to provision. It's very simple here. It's just going to define the service name. So we're going to have to point to that service because the service is how we're pointing to that pod. And so the ingress is going to, point to that demo service, and then the service port is going to be 80. We have that defined in the service here. So if we go back to our Google Cloud console, in the GKE menu, on the left-hand side, there's going to be services and ingress. So we can see our demo service, and it has an endpoint here. This is going to be that node port that we were talking about earlier. And then we're going to see the demo ingress, and here it's defining, there's a IP address defined. So if we click this, it's going to say 44 not found Nginx. We're just going to get rid of this wildcard here. And now we get that welcome to Nginx page. So we've successfully created that Nginx pod, and the ingress for the Google Cloud load balancer ingress is now pointing to that service, and it knows how to route that traffic. So now we successfully have a Nginx pod running in our cluster. And this is not to get confused. I mean, I'm just running the Nginx pod. It's not like I'm using Nginx as the ingress. The cloud load balancer is being used as the ingress. I'll show you how that looks in GCP as well. Let's go back to the Google Cloud page. And on the left-hand menu, let's just scroll down. And then there's a network services section under networking. And then we're going to click load balancing. And here's where the cloud load balancer lives. So you can see that if you're curious. There's some other things too. If we go back to the Kubernetes Engine page, back to cluster, on the left-hand side, there's going to be workloads. And you can actually see this demo deployment, and it has one pod and which cluster it's part of and which namespace. If you click this, you can actually see some metrics. So the CPU, the memory, and the disk. And you can see some details about it. There's some YAML you can see as well, what it actually looks like. There's also an events tab. Going back to the overview, you can also see which revision it is. I ended up deploying this again, but that's why there's 2 revisions. And you can also see kind of which service is exposed and also the ingress. So some useful information here around monitoring, and get some metrics here, and you can actually see how down to the pod level how it's performing, which is super cool stuff. I also want to quickly show how you can actually view the pod logs. So if we go in the left-hand menu, we go to Stack Driver and we go to Logs Viewer, there's an option here called GKE Container. So we can select that. And then there are a whole bunch of different containers here that you can take a look at, actually the ones that get installed with GKE. So that's nice too. We're going to take a look at the demo one because that was the container that we deployed. So we want to take a look at those logs. So we'll click that, and we can see here a bunch of requests from the load balancer. You can also see someone made a request here from Firefox, which was me. And it gives you some nice little insight. So the great thing about this is that you can get all of this insight out of the box. You don't have to configure any of this. So GKE comes with that monitoring and that logging integration, which saves a lot of time for people who are looking to set up Kubernetes clusters, and it makes the user experience really nice as well, that you get all of this out of the box. And you can just start playing it right when you provision a cluster. So that kind of concludes what I wanted to cover. There's a whole bunch of Kubernetes content that I'm planning to create in the future. So if you have any feedback or ideas, please leave a comment below. And once again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.